All right, welcome to Steeler Country. I am Tony Serino. Today on the show, we're going to be previewing the Steelers' final preseason game this season. They will take on the Detroit Lions Sunday. I believe the game is, 4:30. The game's on CBS, so I believe it's on nationally, so everyone will get a chance to see this one. And it's a huge game. I know it's just a preseason game, but this isn't just any preseason game. And this is going to be what determines the 53-man roster as we cut this thing down. The Steelers will make their final cuts on, I believe, Tuesday of next week, and we're also going to be deciding starters. We're gonna decide left guard on Saturday. That battle, or on Sunday, that battle probably has already been won by Kevin Dotson, but let's let it play itself out on the field. Tomlin's certainly not ready to announce any starter just yet. Inside linebacker, as we talked about on yesterday's show, that battle is wide open between Devin Bush and Robert Spillane, and you can even throw Mark Robinson in there. But the one we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about the quarterback battle. Now, before we get into the show, thank you all for watching today. If you're watching on YouTube and you'd prefer this as an audio podcast, I have made this available now as an audio podcast. So you can go wherever you find podcasts, search Steeler Country, you'll find it on there. It usually takes about 24 hours to YouTube to allow me to download this show and process it into an audio file. It's actually also going to be available as a video podcast on Spotify as well. So if you prefer it that way as well, you can certainly get that. And if you're listening to this on audio format, this is a YouTube show. It's a live show on YouTube. I'd love to get you fans involved in the show. So if you want to watch live, usually between 5 and 6 o'clock, I am live here on YouTube. Head on over. You can leave a comment here in chat, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of the show. All right, so let's get into it. As I talked about, we're really going to be talking about roster battles today. That's what preseason game number 3 is all about. Tomlin's calling it the dress rehearsal. It seems like there's a lot of game planning going into this game. Tomlin is certainly focused on things like the run defense, right? I mean, he was asked in his press conference today on Friday, as I'm recording this, about the Lions, the success they had running the football last season, their general effectiveness. They have a pretty good offensive line, and whether or not that's going to be a big key. And he talked about, look, this is a big game planning week for us. We're putting some things in place that should prove to us one way or the other, did we improve this running game? So it's a big week in that way as well, right? Just to kind of see all the things that the coaching staff has kind of been dreaming up in the offseason. Not that they're going to show their hand entirely this week, but again, this will be the first week where you take a game plan, you say, okay, this is what this team wants to do, and see how the players react to that from a kind of week of preparation standpoint. So that'll be another thing to watch for as we go. All right, let's get into the main topic of today's show. Okay, for whatever, Kenny Pickett has become this, just a sensation in the city of Pittsburgh, to the point where I've been saying it. If you've watched me since the beginning of this whole thing, since I started doing these videos, the beginning of training camp, I was there from day one all the way to the second to last week of practice. And I've been very consistent the entire time. I don't think there's really a quarterback battle. I don't. And I said that because Mitch Trubisky was taking all the first team reps. And it just didn't feel like, even though I thought at the beginning of this process, Mason looked like, hey, this kid, maybe Mason's improved enough, or at least he should get some reps with the first team. He did not. And now we're at a point where Kenny Pickett has entered himself into this ring. And to Mike Tomlin, look, for Mike Tomlin's credit, he has said this entire process, this is a quarterback battle. I have my own way of doing this. So this has been the plan. This is a quarterback battle. And when asked this week, is quarterback one going to be decided on Sunday? His answer was yes. So I'll take him at his word, right? I'll take him at his word and believe that, okay, Mitch Trubisky versus Kenny Pickett comes down to what they do on Sunday. I'm super excited to see this. From my own personal thoughts, I would love to see Kenny win this job. Who wouldn't? I mean, what this kid has done already throughout this process, what he did against Seattle. And even if I can't glean a ton as far as his ability to be a capable NFL starter from that game in particular, at least that game kind of shed a lot of the fears of, what if Kenny just can't play whatsoever? I think he proved in that game, look, against a bad defense, a team that's playing all off, and you give me a simple game plan, I can execute that very, very easily. And then against Jacksonville, talked about this on the other show. I mean, some of the throws he made in that game, They were just jump out of your seat wow throws. The fact that a rookie like Kenny Pickett is making those kind of throws already starts to give you this hope of, not only is this kid good right now, how good can he be? I was excited to see, by the way, Brett Coleman, who has a great YouTube channel here. He did a whole video breaking down Kenny Pickett and that drive he had against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Did a great job of breaking down the X's and O's. And again, some of those things that you see on the All-22, right? It seems like, okay, Kenny's just kind of, it's a little slant route here. It's dink and dunking down the field. I thought Brett did a good job of showing, no, it's not. While yes, the average depth of target might not be, 10 yards down the field, these are still relatively high-level throws from Kenny as far as his ability to read and diagnose a defense, understand what he's looking at, and process very quickly to get rid of the ball. And we know Kenny has the accuracy. It's the anticipation and the timing that he's showing at such, I don't want to say such a young age, because, he's 24, 25, but so early on in his NFL career. I'm excited to see what happens on Sunday. Just talking about the battle itself, we'll start with Mitch Trubisky, because he is, at this point, I think he's still QB1, right? He's going to get the first team reps in this one. Tomlin says Trubisky starts, Pickett comes in, then it'll be Rudolph at the end. Okay, we'll talk about Rudolph in a second, because it's a little annoying if it's Trubisky versus Pickett. Like, let's just see that. We have 4 years of tape on Mitch, but for Mitch, what Mitch has to do to win this job is to just continue that kind of level of competency we've seen him over the past 2 games. Mitch Trubisky has not been a quarterback over the first 2 games that you're really going to, that is a wow player, right? I wouldn't jump out of my chair for anything Mitch has done in the first 2 games. In fact, as I've said on this show, I have some real problems with the way that Mitch has played, specifically in those moments where, he's having to bail out and do some kind of extracurricular. I think he can actually do a better job in those moments of keeping his eyes up, and we've talked about that in the past. But I think as long as Mitch doesn't go out there and make a monumental Mitch Trubisky-like mistake, the kind of things we saw him do in Chicago, I still think he's probably the front runner. I think he's the leader in the clubhouse at this point. And this, to me, feels like, Tomlin saying, look, I'm going to give the kid a chance, but it's got to be a knockout. He has to knock him out. Because again, as I look back at how this process has played itself out, Mitch Trubisky took almost every single first team rep in training camp. There were like 1 or 2 days where Trubisky rotated with Mason Rudolph. Kenny Pickett has taken, to my knowledge, just 1 rep or just 1 session in practice with the ones, and that was a 2-minute drill before the Jaguars game. And then he took 2 reps or 2 drives in that game against the Jaguars with the ones. Otherwise, Pickett's really been in a battle for the backup job with Mason Rudolph, where he and Mason were rotating back and forth for that job. So this kind of late entrant into the ring, I think what Tomlin's saying is, look, if this kid goes out there against Detroit this week and does the same thing we just watched him to do against the Lions, but does it again and potentially for a longer period of time. One of the weirdest things that, going back to my whole, is this really a battle? Kenny Pickett, your rookie quarterback, who seemingly is entering himself into the ring, just happened to get the least number of reps of any of the quarterbacks on the team a week ago. So again, it's hard for me to believe this is a real battle, but if it is, I think, like I said, I think it's going to have to be Kenny winning via knockout here, meaning he is going to have to go out there and absolutely light the world on fire once again, as we've seen him do for 2 weeks. Don't get me wrong, it shouldn't come as a complete shock, but again, just kind of law of averages, I guess you could say. Doesn't Kenny kind of have to come a little bit back down to earth? Do we really expect that the Kenny Pickett we've seen for 2 weeks, like that's him? That's just going to be him forever. We're just going to continue to see him go out there and just, yep. Oh, that's easy here, easy there. Bang, 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 right down the field. Like, at some point, I do feel like it's going to level off for Kenny. And if it does level off for Kenny, then I think it's Mitch's job. But as disappointing as that will be for us Steeler fans who are ready to kind of anoint him QB1, the successor to Ben Roethlisberger, let's go in, let's shock the world in the AFC North. Nothing would make me happier than Kenny Pickett winning this job and being good and being a quality quarterback, the same guy we've seen for the last couple weeks as we get into the regular season. And I can go over on my other show on AFC North Talk, rub that in those guys' face for 17 weeks. Like, nothing will make me happier than that, than Kenny Pickett proving all the doubters wrong, myself included, who, was not a huge Kenny Pickett fan when the Steelers drafted him. As far as like, what do I, What do I need to see out of Kenny Pickett to make me feel more comfortable? It's going to make Tomlin more comfortable. I think more throws down the football field. You know, I think for Kenny in this game, it's time to start taking some shots. And I think it's going to be time for Tomlin to tell him, hey, man, take some shots in this one. You know, I don't think we need to have Kenny go into another game where the idea is like, just see the open guy, throw to the open guy. We know Kenny can do that at this point. I think we got a pretty good sample size of when you just tell Kenny, like, you know, you don't go broke, make it a profit type of offense, just find the open guy and deliver. Yeah, I mean, Kenny's going to be good in that. But there are going to be times in the game where he's going to have to push the ball down the field. We're going to want Kenny to push the ball down the field. There's going to be times in the game where when we get into the regular season, they're going to do a lot more deception for a young quarterback. He's going to get some looks where he's not exactly sure what the coverage he's in. And so to simulate that in a preseason game, because I don't know that the Lions are going to come out and be very exotic defensively and throw a bunch of things at Kenny Pickett that he doesn't understand, because it's a preseason game. They don't want to show that stuff. We all get it, right? So Kenny's going to have to simulate some of that. He's going to have to simulate the idea of like, all right, well, let me just try to make, even though this may not be the best throw, let me try to make this throw just to, you know, again, just for that, so everyone can see this is what it's going to look like when Kenny's going to throw a corner shot to try and beat a safety. This is what it's going to look like when it's a deep seam route. This is what's going to look like when it's a one-on-one and Kenny's trying to put a deep ball on a receiver in a one-on-one situation. You know, again, this is a preseason game. We don't need to be results-oriented about this. We don't need to go out there and say, well, you know, Kenny threw 5 incompletions and, you know, that was bad. If it was 5 incompletions, but it was 5 throws we haven't seen from him before, and those throws were good throws, there were 50-50 balls or whatnot, again, we don't need to be results-oriented in a preseason game. It's not important that Steelers win or lose. It's important that we get a fuller picture of who Kenny Pickett is. I'd also like to see, by the way, Kenny Pickett in a little more of the rollout, crazy Kenny Pickett stuff. So going to be a fun battle between these two on Sunday. You know, look, there's a chance that if things go well for Tomlin, if Tomlin has his way, because again, I think Tomlin's kind of set this process up for Mitch Trubisky to be the starter, there's a chance that Sunday is the last time we see Kenny Pickett for a year. I mean, let's not rule that out. I mean, there's also a chance that this is the day that Kenny Pickett anoints himself QB1, but there's also a chance that for all of us who are, you know, enamored with what Kenny Pickett has done so far and kind of daydreaming about a world where, you know, Kenny Pickett is about to shock the entire NFL landscape, it's possible this is the last time we see him for a year. You know, it's possible that he just sits the bench for the entire year. Trubisky's QB1, and, you know, we let this thing play out and we don't see Kenny again for a year. So now the other quarterback we need to talk about is Mitch Trubisky. Oh, sorry, not Mitch Trubisky. Mason Rudolph, not Mitch. Mason. We need to talk about Mason Rudolph for a second, because right before I went live here, I read a tweet from Ian Rappaport who said Mason Rudolph is drawing interest from other teams. That the Steelers would potentially be willing to part with Mason, given, you know, the compensation was, you know, fair market value. Now, I don't know what that is. I mean, is that a 5th round pick? Is that a 6th round pick? We just saw quarterbacks get traded this week for what, conditional 7th round picks. I don't know what they're going to be asking for him. I think it's interesting though. You know, if Kenny beats out Mason Rudolph, you know, there's no way Mason wants to sit around here and be the 3, right? If Kenny doesn't win the job, but he's the backup and Mason's your 3, I mean, you can already, if you go watch any Mason Rudolph interview from the last week or so, you can tell he's done a great job of not like openly talking about it, but you can tell he's a very frustrated player right now with not just kind of the results here of the fact that he is now QB3 on this roster, but I think he's even more frustrated with the way that this has kind of played itself out. The fact that he didn't get a lot of QB1 reps, the fact that early on in camp, I'm sure he felt it just like all of us who were there watching felt it. I'm the best one out here. And if this is a competition, the best one out here should start to run with the ones a little bit. And I think that kind of frustration has maybe boiled over to the point where I think if he has a good game on Sunday, it may be a situation where he just goes to the coaching staff and the front office after this game and says, hey guys, like, give me another chance somewhere else. Cut me, trade me, something. Like, I just can't sit as the 3rd quarterback on this football team right now. So I'm not going to be shocked if that happens. Now, the question for Mason is how much time is he actually going to get in this game? Because if we're legitimately in QB1 battle time, I want to see, you know, you're going to want to see a quarter and a half of Mitch, right? Well, you know, again, first year player with the team. Let's see what he can do with this unit. I want to get a little bit of time, certainly for Kenny with the first team. If this is the dress rehearsal game, you know, if Najee's going to play, all the starters are playing in this football game. then yeah, give me a couple more looks with Kenny with that first team, and then let him kind of bleed into the second team as well to get me a ton of looks of Kenny. I mean, again, Kenny's a rookie. We have no frame of reference for Kenny Pickett thus far. Give me a ton of reps of Kenny. If Kenny Pickett doesn't have the most attempts in this football game, the most reps, I should say, in this football game, what are we doing? What are we doing? If it's a battle, you gotta let's find out. Let's find out what we don't know about Kenny Pickett, which is a lot, given that we've only seen him for 23 reps thus far. Mason Rudolph had 20 reps, 20 throws in last game, in the Jaguars game. Kenny Pickett's had 23 through 2 games. Give me some Kenny Pickett football in this one. I would like to see 2 quarters, maybe even more, of Kenny Pickett. All right, so, again, I think it's Mitch versus Kenny for QB1. It's Mason potentially playing for a spot on another roster. That's where we are at the quarterback position. If you have any thoughts here, let me know in chat. We'll get to that at the end of today's show. We'll go over here to the running back position. Maybe not as dramatic as QB1, but certainly an intriguing battle here at running back that's played itself out over training camp and now these first 2 preseason games. Really, the battle, I think, has come down to, well, there's multiple facets to this now, but it's really come down to Anthony McFarland versus Jaylen Warren, with Benny Snell as kind of an asterisk. Like, he could get cut under the right circumstances. You could see it happening, even if it is probably unlikely today. The Steelers, I think, are going to keep 4 running backs on this roster. Najee Harris is one of them. Derek Watt is probably one of them, although we'll get to that in a second. And so then the other 2 are going to be, Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, Jaylen Warren. 3 dogs, 2 bones. Probably Benny Snell makes it, probably between Jaylen Warren and McFarland. I think at this point, Jaylen Warren has the edge over McFarland, but it's still one more game to prove it. Still one more game for McFarland to go out there and have a quality performance like we saw him against Seattle. A lot of this is going to be dictated by the play of the offensive line. The Lions, while they don't have like a formidable defense. I think from a front 7 perspective, this is going to be a nice test for where this offensive line is right now. Let's say, this is not Aiden Hutchinson and whatnot. On the pass rushers are certainly going to be their own thing in the passing game. From a run perspective, I think this would be a nice test for where this offensive line is right now, which is just, they're not very good. And now the other part of this to talk about is that Connor Hayward is getting looks at fullback this week, which I think has raised everyone's eyebrows, because does that mean that, is Derek Watt fighting for a roster spot? Derek Watt is listed as a fullback. What he really is a core special teamer. So them putting Connor Hayward at fullback, does it signal a roster battle, or does it just signal that they feel like this kid's athletic enough and they're comfortable enough with him playing, kind of all over the place? I don't know. It's a weird one, because again, Watt's so good as a special teamer. It's why they brought him here. It's why he stuck around. I know everyone's like, why don't they use Derek Watt? They do. It's on special teams. But again, as we'll kind of go through today, you'll see there are a lot of core special teamers on this roster, who seem like they're locks. So potentially one of those guys is going to have to lose out. As I've talked about before, there are some back ends of some positions where you really don't want to cut a guy. Do you really want to cut Anthony McFarland right now? Probably not. But something else to watch for in this one. And by the way, just because he's practicing a fullback, like how many fullback reps are we actually going to see against the Lions? How many fullback reps are we going to see in the regular season period? So maybe that might be one. The whole Connor Hayward played a fullback thing that's a nothing story. It's an interesting kind of tidbit in a practice report. And maybe not so much this kind of, Derek Watt, he's on the 53-man roster cuts. We'll see. All right, going over to wide receiver. This got interesting for me as far as the 53, because Calvin Austin still isn't healthy yet. He's not going to play in this football game. Nick Faribault reported that today, that Calvin is still down with that foot injury. So that may, if he has to go to IR, that may open the door. Well, that will certainly open the door for a Steven Sims or Miles Boykin. It could even open the door for Tyler Vaughns. We start talking about this team wants to keep, do they want to keep 5 or 6? Like if it's 6, it's between Boykin and Sims. But if it's 6 and Calvin Austin goes to IR, then it's between Boykin, Sims, and throw Tyler Vaughn's name in there. Vaughn's made some good plays with the third team, and I'd be interested in this game how quickly Vaughn's can get on the field. Does he get any reps, any looks with the ones whatsoever? Probably not, because this is a dress rehearsal game. But does he get a look with the twos? And I think that will start to tell you where they feel like he is on the roster. The guy's made some plays at the end of games. There's no doubting that. The other thing to talk about here at this position is that I do think that there's a weirdly forgotten man on this roster. It's almost like, I don't know, there was a superstar player on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it started day one of camp, and it continued all the way till about halftime of that Seattle game. And that was George Pickens. George Pickens was, oh my goodness, can you believe how good this kid is? I was certainly saying the same thing as I watched him day after day at training camp, just, make play after play, acrobatic play. He, as I said on this show, I'll never go to training camp again if this kid doesn't end up being at least a good player, because the throw or the catches he was making, the plays he was making at camp were that of a potential superstar in this league. And I know that that's silly to say at training camp, but you just cannot believe how consistently this kid was making play after play. But then Kenny came in against Seattle, and really ever since then, it's just been kind of the Kenny Pickett show, and we've all kind of, okay, yeah, George Pickens, right? Oh, right, yeah, no, he is. I think we need to let's get the George Pickens hype train started up again, okay? Because look, it's very possible that Kenny doesn't win the job, and we're gonna have to wait for that to really get started. But George Pickens is gonna be a starting wide receiver on this football team. He will. If this is the dress rehearsal game and he's going to play, I think it's going to be him and Deontay on the outside, Claypool in the slot. Hopefully the offensive line holds up enough in this game to give Trubisky some opportunities to make some throws. And I hope George is a part of that. Again, his playmaking ability, his downfield playmaking ability, his big play ability, something this team so lacked a year ago. And as we start transitioning from talking about the 53rd and 54th guys on this roster and start talking about actual wins and losses, George Pickens is a huge part of, he doesn't play any part in the 53rd, 54th guy. He's not in a roster battle. He is clearly a starter on this football team. But I think how quickly he can go from being a good player who's, this interesting rookie to, holy crap, this is a guy you can rely on. That's the difference between wins and losses for this football team, because of how big those kind of down the field big plays are going to be and how much this team missed that a year ago. So let's not just completely forget about how good George Pickens was throughout camp and the potential that he represents on this roster. The other thing to talk about here at wide receiver, if this is the dress rehearsal, I would expect Gunnar is going to take all of the return reps in this game. He did have the fumble last week, so that tape is out there. Certainly he cannot afford to fumble. He cannot afford any kind of silly muffed punt or anything in this game. That would be devastating for his chances. Because remember, Steven Sims has been a very nice player in those kind of open field situations. He had a nice punt return. He's had a couple nice end arounds. Sims potentially pushing him in some way. And again, it would, much like with the Pickett versus Trubisky thing, I think it would take like a knockout blow in order for Gunnar to not make it as the return guy. But he's already fumbled once. We know how Tomlin feels about that. At tight end, not much to talk about here. The 53 is decided. As I talked about, Connor's playing more fullback. So does Connor push Watt off the roster? I don't think so. But yeah, not much to say here. I'd like to see Connor kind of have a bounce back game. As I talked about, he's an interesting prospect, but it's all for him. It's all about consistency, and it's all about kind of the little things for him. He had some penalties. And just kind of some miscommunication with the quarterback in that first game. Didn't really make much of an impact last week. Again, for him, I think he's an intriguing prospect, but he's got to get more consistent. The offensive line, what can we say about the offensive line? There's, I think we all know what we need to see here, right? Which is just any level of competency will be great. Just kind of any level, anything whatsoever will be good, because last week was an out-and-out disaster. The battle here is at left guard. The battle's between Dotson and Green. I would imagine that Dotson's going to start this week. And I would imagine that there's almost nothing he can do to not win the spot, given that Kendrick Green for 2 games in a row now, plus a bunch of camp, has just not looked like. I mean, the guy is like a borderline. Should he even be in the NFL, regardless of should he be a starter? So I think that battle has probably already played itself out, but it's worth watching. Dan Moore is going to have, I believe Hutchinson's going to play on that side. So he should be going up against Aiden Hutchinson, another rookie. And this is what, three weeks in a row that Dan Moore is going up against a rookie, because it was Boye Mafe week 1. Last week it was Trayvon Walker, right? And this week it's Aiden Hutchinson. It's tough, man. It is tough because, look, I understand Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall pick. Aiden Hutchinson is number 2 overall pick. And then Boye Mafe was an underrated guy who a lot of people felt like maybe should have gone higher and whatnot. But Dan Moore struggled. And if he struggles again and against 3 rookies, and then week 1 it's Trey Hendrickson, who I think might be the most underrated pass rusher in the National Football League right now. Yikes-a-rooney. Yikes. Not looking forward to that. It sounds like a core 4 might not play in this game. Joe Haig is still in the concussion protocol as far as I know. So that may mean that Trent Scott starts on the right side. We really think about the roster construction here and who's going to make it. It does feel like there's 8 guys who I think, and maybe even 9 guys who I think you could almost say they kind of all have to make it. Because you talk about the starting 5, right? Plus Kendrick Green. Plus, I think Joe Haig. You can't cut Joe Haig because he's kind of the swing tackle at this point. I think you can't cut Hassenauer because he's your backup center, right? You're certainly not going to put Kendrick Green back at center. And then I thought John McGlue played so many good minutes last year. I've kind of been an advocate of, I think it's pity that they didn't include John McGlue in the battle for left guard. So there's your 9. And then, of course, Trent Scott's going to get a chance in this one to put some tape on film. But yeah, I think that the 8 or 9 guys are there. It's whether or not they want to keep 8 or 9. I suppose. Well, no, Haig's not going to go to IR with a concussion. Tomlin said the other day he was kind of close to coming back. So yeah, I think the offensive line for me, it's less about the 53. This is less about who's going to make the roster. This is less about who's going to start. I think I have a pretty good eye for who those are going to be. It's more about can this group start to even move in the right direction? Again, I'm not saying that this needs to be a game where Trubisky has all day to throw and there are rushing lanes that you or I could run through. That's not going to happen, right? But just some level of competency based on what we saw last week. You just need to see any level of improvement. On the defensive line, once again, I don't know that there's real roster battles here so much as you just kind of want to see the young guys develop. We're probably, with this being the dress rehearsal game, you'll see all the starters: Hayward, Alualu, Ogunjobi. Interested to see for a game where they're really going to be focusing on run stopping, and if they are kind of willing to show their hand here, I'm interested to see how much in base sets, early downs where the Lions aren't in 11 personnel, where it calls for a nickel defense. Do the Steelers play Ogunjobi in those spots, or do they play Chris Wormley? I've always thought Chris Wormley was a better run defender than Ogunjobi. Ogunjobi put some nice things on film, though, last week. And so that's one thing I'm looking for is do they feel comfortable enough? Is Ogunjobi an every down guy, or is he more of the pass rush specialist, as Tomlin talked about in that introductory press conference into training camp? Be watching for that. It sounds like Isaiah Loudermilk won't play in this game. He went down with injury in that Jacksonville game. Only had a couple reps in that one. So you're not going to, obviously we're not going to see any kind of growth and development out of him in this one. Obviously I'm excited about DeMarvin Leal. I expect he'll be in there with the second or third units. And I think at this point I'm pretty comfortable with who he is, although I'd like to see, more growth and development from him out of a kind of, just kind of being better in the run game, being more patient, in the run game, because he's one of these guys. Discipline is the word I was looking for. Be more disciplined in the running game, because he's just one of these guys who just wants to get upfield and kind of abandon his gap. The other thing, I guess we'll have to mention this, because I know I've not been a fan of Henry Mondo throughout the entire process. Still am not. But Montravius Adams is still going to be out with that ankle injury. I mean, this guy, he's been gone since pretty much camp started, right? I mean, when was the last time he even practiced? Did he play in a preseason game? I don't think he did. So Adams is the guy they brought in last year. It was supposed to be that he would, because he had to get on a moving train last year, the game, look, was hard for him to kind of get worked in. And there were times where I thought he put up some good tape, but it wasn't all good for Montrevious. But this was going to be his first year. He's got a full season with the team now, and he's going to be able to work himself in training camp. And yeah, that doesn't happen. He's just not playing. And so you do wonder, is this an IR candidate? I mean, does Mondo just kind of make the roster because Montrevious Adams is healthy? Is that a situation that could actually play itself out? Because as I've said before, I'm not super in love with the idea of this entire nose tackle situation being Tyson Alualu or bust right now. And I don't think Montrevious Adams is a bad player, and I've kind of been okay with the idea of, look, even if Alualu can't be, you know, a 60, 70 rep a game type player, you know, you could certainly have Adams in there at times. But if it's going to be Mondo, yeah, I don't love that. I don't love that. At edge rusher, yeah, this is, I guess there's a battle here now, because as we talked about the other day, Gennard Avery's cut. Potentially, this is just going to be something where there's a guy who's going to make the 53 who isn't on the roster today, meaning that they're going to go out and sign someone after everyone else makes their cuts to 53. But right now, I think, you know, Tuska and Hamilcar Rashad are kind of your leaders in the clubhouse. Those are your best two after. Jelante Scott was a training camp name that, you know, he kept flashing throughout, but he really hasn't done a great job of flashing in preseason. He had a really poor game against Seattle. I don't love the Steelers don't have a kind of third edge rusher. They have a couple other guys, but I don't know that they really have a player who, if Watt's coming out, if Highsmith's coming out, that you feel comfortable where, okay, well, we can still get pressure with any of these guys. So that, you know, it's certainly a big worry of this defense. But as I said yesterday, this may be a situation where Tomlin and company are putting much more priority at this position on run defense than maybe we are as fans. And that's why it's Rashad and Tuska and Scott battling for this. And Gennard Avery, who I thought was clearly the best pass rusher of all the backups, he's not even on the team anymore. So, you know, I think for me, it's between those three guys, Rashad, Tuska, Scott. I mean, Rondell Carter's still on the roster. I don't know that he's done enough to actually pass up any of the players we just talked about. And quite honestly, if one of those guys I talked about doesn't make it, well, two of those guys don't make it, it's because someone who's not on the roster today got signed after the fact. All right, one of the other big battles on this roster is, of course, that linebacker. If you heard the show yesterday where we went over the defense, I was really impressed with what I saw from Devin Bush, from Robert Spillane, and from what I saw from Mark Robinson. I think that, I think this battle got a lot more interesting because, again, I'm not comfortable with any of these guys just yet. You know, look, they all put out good tape against Jacksonville, but you go back to that Seattle game, and I think none of those guys put up really great tape. And so for me, it's going to be a level of consistency thing. But it's, you know, this certainly is not a runaway position. I mean, I don't even know if there is a leader in the clubhouse today, quite honestly. I guess it would be Devin Bush because he's been the starter, and that's how you would kind of separate it at this point. Spillane had a really good game last week, though. We know about his kind of veteran savvy. We know he's a guy who you can kind of trust. The right place, right time. You just worry about if he's out there, you know, offensive coordinators are looking at him and they're licking their chops and saying, I can exploit that player. Now, of course, they're probably going to say the same thing about Devin Bush. So I don't know. Quite honestly, if you want to know what I would do, I would start Mark Robinson. I love Mark Robinson. I thought the tape that he put out there last week as the game kind of slowed down for him and he was just able to kind of play with that kind of natural aggression that we know he has going all the way back to his days at Ole Miss last year. He's the kind of player I love on defense. You know, yeah, maybe you're going to want to back it off a little bit because he's probably going to bite on too many play actions and he's going to be out of position in certain cases. But man, you know, just as a fan, I'd much rather have a player who's playing with too much aggression, who's kind of flying around there, throwing his body around, than the guy who's kind of pitter patter and, I don't know. Now you guys know what I'm talking about. So the other thing is Marcus Allen. I think Marcus Allen kind of has to play in this game. Marcus Allen's been silent, dead silent this entire time. And if he's going to make this roster, I know he's a good special teamer. You know, as I talked about, everybody's a good special teamer. Somehow the Steelers have 9 good special teamers. I know Allen's a good special teamer, but I think the Steelers are not cutting. They're not cutting Devin Bush. They're not cutting Robert Spillane. They're probably not cutting Mark Robinson either. They are going to cut Buddy Johnson, in all likelihood. So maybe they keep 5 here, and that's how Allen makes it. But at some point, it's a numbers game, right? You can't keep an extra at every position. At some point, you got to make a hard cut. And as I talked about, Benny Snell might be that hard cut. Derek Watt might be that hard cut. They might just cut the receivers down to 5, and there's your hard cut. Or it could be here at inside linebacker where they only keep 4 and kind of sacrifice Marcus Allen because he's going to provide less as a linebacker and more as a special teamer. Corner, now this one's done. I know I played lip service yesterday on that defense show to Chris Steele. And hey, here's a guy who's running above Justin Lane. But again, I think that just is more about Justin Lane than it does Chris Steele. I think this is like just lock it up. Unless there's an injury, it is going to be 5 players here: Kilo, Cam, Levi, Pierre, Arthur Mollett. Done deal. Done deal unless there's someone has to go to IR. So yeah, and again, what I'm looking for tomorrow from that group is just, once again, I think this group throughout camp and throughout preseason has shown a level of consistency that makes me comfortable with all 3 guys when we talk about Cam and Levi and Akilo. As I talked about yesterday, I didn't love Cam coming out of the breaks. He tripped on one. He was just late on the other one. But I'm not going to let one game and 2 plays dictate how I feel about Cam Sutton going into the season. I think he's still the smart player we know Mike Tomlin loves. And so I feel pretty comfortable with this group overall. And there's really not a battle whatsoever. Safety got interesting because the Steelers signed this guy. They claimed him off of waivers, actually. Elijah Riley from the New York Jets. And what makes that interesting is that while this room is pretty easy to decide, Minka, Terrell Edmonds, DeMonte Casey, Trey Norwood, right? These are all guys who aren't just going to play. I think there are packages with which Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin are going to want to get all 3 of those guys, or 3 of the 4 of those guys on the field at the same time. Certainly in dime, that will be the case with Trey Norwood coming on. But I think there are going to be cases where they're going to want to put KZ, Minka as your deep safeties and put Edmonds in the box as well. We saw that against Jacksonville. So those 4 are really easy, And again, all I'm looking for in this game is just a level of competency. Miles Killebrew has been on this roster for a year now. He's another core special teamer, but they signed Elijah Riley at the last second. Killebrew hasn't been around. I think he spent a lot of time injured as well, right? So once again, another one of these players where you have to make a hard cut here at safety. Are you only keeping 4 or are you keeping 5 in it? And that 5th guy is Riley and not Killebrew. Something to watch for the back end of this thing. I think the Steelers were kind of done with what they had seen from Donovan Steiner and wanted to move on and get a look at Elijah Riley. It's going to be hard. I think probably hard for Riley to make the roster. But again, the question when we cut down to 53 at the end of the day is how many of these true core special teamers who are not going to see the field when it comes to regular play is this team really going to feel comfortable keeping? Because if let's go back to Jaylen Warren for a second. If you feel comfortable with Jaylen Warren making this roster, I think you then should feel comfortable with him being RB2. And so now you have Benny Snell, who's really only value to you is as a special teamer. We know Derek Watt's only value to you is a special teamer. Same for Marcus Allen, right? You're going to keep Spillane and Bush and Mark Robinson. Allen all of a sudden becomes a player who's much more a core special teamer only. And we know Killebrew at this point is a core special teamer only. How many, right? How many did I just name? Benny, Watt, Allen, and Killebrew. 4 core special teamers. I mean, it's not a ton, but if we're talking about surprise cuts come Tuesday, one of those guys, I think, could be the surprise cut. And also, guys going to IR always throw a wrench in this. It always, at the end of the day, it's like, whoa, I didn't see that. I didn't see this guy making it. It's like, oh yeah, because they threw this guy on IR. So, okay. All right, let's get to some of your comments. What are you looking for in this game on Sunday? State of the Steelers says biggest tune-up game ever. Okay, I'll go with you on that one. Again, you don't want to get too hyperbolic here in the preseason. Well, am I kidding? Of course I want to get hyperbolic. Yeah, this is the biggest preseason. This is the biggest tune-up game ever. And by the way, State of the Steelers is its own YouTube channel. You guys should check the channel out. I was on that show yesterday or this morning. I was on the show last night, but I think it went up this morning. So check that channel out today, right after I finish here. State of the Steelers. I think you can find that here on YouTube. I think it's an audio podcast as well. So check that out. But yeah, if that first preseason game, as I said, with Kenny was like a rock concert, where it kind of felt like this crescendo, like when are we going to see Kenny? Is this the Super Bowl of the preseason? Can I use that analogy? Is it okay to call this game the Super Bowl of the preseason? And the two contenders are Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett fighting for QB1? Is that the right analogy for this preseason game? It's huge. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You know, I didn't expect when you think about going back to Ben Roethlisberger, right? In these last couple years, you know, after Ben had the elbow injury, I'm sure we all, I mean, of course, I thought this. I'm sure a lot of you did too, which is like, man, is that it? Like, is this elbow injury just going to be the end of Ben Roethlisberger? I'm never going to watch him again. Like, what a strange way for that to end, where it's just boom, it's over. Elbow injury, and then he never plays again, right? I mean, I think all of us kind of had that thought that it certainly could be the case. Now, it didn't end up being the case, but remember, he comes back that year, and then they lose to the Browns in like devastating fashion in that playoff game, and you see him, you know, he's tears in his eyes next to Marquise Pouncey on the bench of that game. And once again, you're like, yo, did I just watch the last game that Ben Roethlisberger ever played? Is that it? I mean, that's how it ends. Is like, they got waxed by the Browns in the playoffs. And every time every time those kind of thoughts went through my mind, of course, you have to start to think about like, wow, if the Ben Roethlisberger era is over, you know, is this when we start to have the down, for those of you who are young, who only remember the Ben Roethlisberger era, you don't know what losing is like in Pittsburgh. You don't understand that the Steelers, in fact, can have losing seasons. It's possible, right? When you play a season out, it is possible, Steeler fans, that you can end the regular season with more losses than wins. It's happened before. It has. I know it doesn't seem like that's possible in Pittsburgh, but you know, I've been a fan, or I've been watching since about 1992 was the first season I can really remember. I think I was 7 years old at the time. But yeah, I mean, there were some losing seasons in there. I remember, you know, the 6-10 year where they were, you know, going back and forth between, what was it, Tom Zach and Cordell was one of the seasons. And then, oh my goodness, don't even get me started on the Mike Tomczak versus Jim Miller versus Cordell year. I mean, imagine this, Steeler fans, okay? The last time the Steelers had a quarterback battle, like a high-profile quarterback, well, there are two, but the last time they had a high-profile quarterback battle, it was between Jim Miller, who I'm sure a lot of you never even heard of, Cordell Stewart, and Mike Tomczak. And you know who won that battle? Jim Miller. Jim Miller won that battle, and I believe Cowher started him for like a half. And Jim Miller sucked, and Cowher was like, okay, get out of here. And Tomczak came in. Tomczak also was not great. Then there was also another quarterback battle I forgot about. Kent Graham versus Cordell Stewart. And you want to talk about another just a disaster. That was what, 2000? That was a disaster. Oh my God, Kent Graham. Like, I mean, I think he actually had cement in his feet. So anyway, the point of this whole kind of thing is to say that whenever I kind of daydreamt about what's it going to be like when Ben retires, I always dreamt like, man, that's going to be depressing. That's going to be a sad time. You know, it's going to be like, okay, we got to watch losing seasons again. And, and especially, you know, watching Lamar and all the success he's had and now, you know, and Burrow and all of that. And it's like, boy, you know, and the Steelers are kind of coming to the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era, right as a time where the rest of the division is like really on the way up. Who would have thought that we'd be this excited right now? I mean, who would have thought that you would come into this preseason game and not feel like, oh my God, which of these two guys? I mean, if you flip a coin, whichever one of these guys you want, they both are bad, right? And that's how I kind of imagined that this would play itself out. But here we are. And if Mitch wins the job, like I'm not sad that Mitch wins the job. I think Mitch has done a decent enough job. I'm excited to see what Mitch can do in a Mike Tomlin-led team, right? Where he's got some competency at the top. I think Canada is still going to put him in situations that allow him to use his legs and throw on the run and the things we know Trubisky does well. Of course, I'm excited about that. But I'm gonna be through the moon if Kenny wins this job. Give me a break. I'm gonna lose my mind, especially if he ends up being good. All right, DN here says, any chance we get a look at Calvin Austin? No, he's hurt. The foot injury is going to keep him out of this one. We will not see a single play from Calvin Austin in the preseason this year. And that is disappointing because he was a guy in camp that I started to get more and more impressed with. I'm always the kind of guy when you see a player who's like, okay, this is the fastest guy in the draft or one of the fastest guys in the draft. You know, I'm always kind of side eye of that of, all right, you're really fast, but what else do you do? You know, I mean, it's kind of the Dre Archer effect. Aren't we all kind of like that as Steeler fans? Where we all, who amongst us didn't jump all over the Dre Archer hype train? I mean, it wasn't just like, choo-choo, Dre Archer, the fastest guy in the draft. This guy's going to, you know, he's going to go for 99-yard touchdowns every play. And it's like, you know, actually watch him on the field, and you're like, where's the 4.2 speed that I was told this kid has? So, yeah, so when Calvin Austin came in, I was like, all right, let's see it on the field. And let's see how this really plays itself out. The thing that I was really impressed with Calvin throughout camp is not a straight line fast guy. He's not a guy who's like straight line fast, but the moment you ask him to turn or kind of make any sort of adjustment, it's like a tank, right? It's like boop, boop. No, he actually has real good lateral quickness as well. And I think what he does such a good job of is being able, especially on those end arounds, to turn upfield and not lose a bunch of speed. You know, and it doesn't just it's not a kind of stop and start situation. It's very fluid. He's a very fluid athlete. He's small. I mean, he is super, super small out there. There was that play. I think it was the first day pads came on. He catches a slant over the middle. And DeMonte Casey, no, that's right. Pads weren't even on yet. It's when they put the shells on, right? So they put on like kind of, you know, these kind of fake shoulder pad things. And Casey comes down and just cracks him. Took it easily, and then, you know, he came back. That was not when he got injured. So yeah, I was excited. I thought he had some juice, not just as a kind of end around player. I thought Calvin Austin could have been an interesting player down the football field. Again, you talk about, you know, with Pickens and what he represents as a down the field target. I thought that could have been the case for Calvin as well. It still can be. I mean, again, you know, he's not going to play in preseason. He's still going to make the roster. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's in any sort of jeopardy of actually being a 53-man roster cut. At worst case scenario, he's on IR. So, all right, talking about Mason Rudolph here. Disturbed says, rumors out now if two teams interested, probably a sixth or backup caliber O-line. Ooh, a player-for-player swap for Mason Rudolph? Yeah, I don't know if you're going to get any. I don't think you're going to get anything close. When you think about what a premium there is right now on anything close to a starting caliber offensive lineman, I just don't think that they can get anything. Like, even if they were to trade Mason Rudolph for an O-lineman, I don't know that, you know, they probably end up in that kind of Joe Haig, J.C. Hassenauer, John LeGlue type of rotation more than actually competing for a starting spot. I mean, quite honestly, and I'll give credit here to Derek. I don't know his last name. Derek, he writes for Sports Illustrated. Derek the Kid on Twitter. He was talking about this with Noah on their podcast, All Steelers Talk. And they were saying, you know, there's really not a spot on this offensive line right now where even if you said, okay, I have a good player that I can give you, you know, the Steelers are almost incentivized in a lot of ways not to try it. And I know that sounds silly, but think about it this way. You know, they invested a 4th-round pick in Dan Moore. They've kind of been all in on the idea of like, let's see what Dan Moore can do. We think we might have found this kid. We might have found a true left tackle in this kid based on what we saw a year ago and the kind of growth and development he showed throughout the year. And I know the first 2 preseason games have been really tough for him, but we know how patient the Steelers are. Right? They're not a team that's kind of a snap judgment type team where, oh, this guy's bad, get him out. And that's why Kendrick Green is still battling for the left guard spot, even though every single one of us looking go, yeah, that battle is over, son. Kendrick Green can't play. The Steelers are a very patient team. They're not going to do that. And so, you know, are the Steelers, even if someone offered them, I mean, obviously not like a Trent Williams type of, you know, just here's an average left tackle. Would you like to have this average 32-year-old left tackle who we don't want anymore? It's almost like the Steelers would be incentivized saying no, because at the end of the day, they kind of need to figure out what they have in Dan Moore first, even if it is going to hurt their offensive line in general. At left guard's the one spot where I probably disagree with what Derek and Noah were saying. I think left guard is a spot where if someone came and knocking and said, hey, we got this, you know, 32-year-old left guard who is a solid player and we don't want him, I think the Steelers would have to say, yes. Yes, please. Now, you can make the argument, same with Dan Moore, is that they drafted this kid in Dotson. I think they might have something here, although I think the problem for Dotson is he's been hurt so much. The coaching staff doesn't like him. You can make an argument that he could be shifted. Mason Coley just got in this offseason, and he hasn't even been bad. I mean, Mason Cole's the best offensive lineman. So, you know, you would actually have to be given like a real upgrade at center to throw away what they already have in Mason. At right guard, okay, even if the Steelers got, you know, another offer for here's a really good right guard, they just paid this guy $26 million over 4 years to James Daniels. They're not throwing that away. I mean, as much as all of us would sit here and say, I'm sorry, Tony, the left or the right guard situation is bad right now. I don't care how much they paid James Daniels. You got to get a better player there. The Steelers are patient. They're not going to do that. And then at right tackle, you know, we all know about Chooks. Chooks is a decent pass blocker and a liability in the running game. But they knew that when they signed him to that 4-year deal this offseason. So, you know, we all talk about they got to go into free agency and get someone. They got to get someone. They got to upgrade. Where does it seem realistically, again, not just talking about in Madden, In Madden, yeah, when I load my Madden franchise, guess what? Half these dudes are gone immediately. Day one, baby. But it's not Madden, right? This is real life. This is how the Steelers really operate. So realistically, who do you think the Steelers could realistically make a move to go get and upgrade? And which guy are they then benching or moving? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because they talk about this Isaiah Wynn and all that stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, that's fine, but where are you putting him? You want to put him at guard? I don't think he wants to play guard. So anyway, not to like depress everybody with like, yeah, you're stuck. You're good. This is the offensive line and you'll like it. But it's kind of that way, isn't it? This is the offensive line we're stuck with. Now, as far as trading in Mason for a 6th round pick, I'd probably do that. I don't want Mason around here. If he doesn't want to be here, go. I'm not one of these people. I talked about this the other day. I'm not one of these people who are like, wait. What about what happened back in 2019 when all of the quarterbacks got hurt? I mean, that was a weird year. If that happens again, yeah, the Steelers are going to be screwed again. But, we're really going to sit here today and be like, well, if Mason comes in, they can still make the playoffs. I mean, as good as Mason's been, let's be honest. Probably not. Sky Hunter, if they sat Kenny Pickett for a year behind a guy like Brady or Peyton or Rodgers, fine, but behind Mitch, what's he going to learn from that? Look, I'll agree with you on this. Look, I'm not sitting here today and saying that if Tony Serino were head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that he would start Mitch Trubisky over Kenny Pickett. Of course not. You guys know me. I'm hype train Tony, baby. Listen, if I was head coach, okay, hype train Tony, if he was head coach, he saw the throw to Freiermuth down the seam where Pickett read the linebacker's leverage and kind of threw with anticipation with a guy in his face, right? I would have just immediately, right then, got on the phone with Canton, Ohio, and said, yeah, I got this kid, Kenny Pickett. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. Start making the bust now, okay? That's how I feel about Kenny Pickett. I'm talking about how has Mike Tomlin treated this quarterback situation, and what is realistic when we're talking about who can win this battle? We can live in a fantasy world where we all just go, Kenny's the best player. I want to see Kenny start. Of course we all do. As I've said, you can't speak rationally about Kenny Pickett right now because we haven't seen him throw a bad pass yet. All the incompletions he's thrown thus far are, an out route that probably should have been caught, a back shoulder that was a good throw and should have been caught, and a spike. So when we talk about like, I want Kenny to start, of course we do. We all do. We all do. Right? Again, it's for Tomlin. It's about really evaluating who gives this team the best chance right now to win a Super Bowl. That is his assessment. And that's kind of what he's been doing this entire time. And his assessment throughout the entire process has been, I really only have one guy right now that gives me that chance. I think it's Mitch. And I guess at this point he feels like, well, if Kenny's this good, maybe I do need to give him an opportunity. Again, I don't want people to assume that my saying Trubisky is going to be the day one starter is what I would do personally. I would start Kenny, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Bobby says, this is Tomlin doing Mitch a solid for saving us from Mason. Indeed. Although, if this were between, okay, here's an interesting thought experiment. Let's say they had never signed Mitch, but instead went through this whole process this entire time of Tomlin and company lying to us, but saying, we believe in Mason Rudolph. He is our starting quarterback. We believe that Mason Rudolph is our starting quarterback. And then they end up drafting Kenny, and we go through this entire process, and it's Mason versus Kenny. See, if that were the case, then I'd be telling you today, I think Tomlin's going to start Kenny. I think in that case, Tomlin starts Kenny. Even though this whole process, Kenny hadn't gotten, if it had to play out the exact same way, where Kenny got the exact same number of first-team reps, it was always Mason. I think he starts Kenny in that case. See, the thing about Trubisky is, remember, we talk about the potential of Kenny and what Kenny could be. But, there's also the potential of like, well, maybe what we're seeing from Kenny Pickett, because it's only been 20 reps, is a mirage. And I think Tomlin knows that because Tomlin's seen every rep in camp, including those first couple days. He knows what Kenny's capable of. Whereas with Mitch, I think he knows I got a veteran guy. He's been in a bunch of different situations. He's not going to get put to a lot of situations, especially as defenses start to maneuver things around, where he's going to get that kind of deer in headlights of, oh, okay, here's a situation I haven't seen before. Again, we've seen 20 plays of Kenny. There's going to be a lot. Look, if the expectation is that Kenny's going to start and Kenny's going to look this good for 17 games and the Steelers are just going to be like a 12-win team because Kenny's this good, like, take me with you on that Fantasyland ride because I want to live there too. I just don't think that's realistic. And I think Tomlin knows that, and that's why he's anticipating that this is Trubisky first. But if Kenny is this good, like, let's try it out, All right. Ali says, I'm really not a fan of the core special teamer only guy. Those hidden yards can be made up on the other end with replacement talent. Well, I get your point. They always say, I'll agree with you in this way. The saying that's always said, special teams is a third of the game. There are 3 teams. There's offense, defense, and special teams. It's a third of the game. It's not a third of the game. Okay, there are what? How many plays in a game are there? Like 100 or whatever? It's 50-50 between offense and defense. Okay, there aren't 50 special teams. You know what I mean? It's like it's not a third. It's not 30. It's not there are 100 plays and 30 of them are offense, 30 of them are defense, and 30 are special teams. Special teams are like what? 6-7 plays a game? They matter. Don't get me wrong. They do matter. But that's why I'm going over the roster. I'm looking at like 4, 5, 6 core special teamers. It's like, okay, hold on. Mark Robinson can play special teams. Okay. Jalen Warren can play special teams. And then maybe they're not going to be as good as a Benny Snell or a Derek Watt. But I'm not cutting those guys to keep, Miles Killebrew around. I'm sorry. I'm definitely not doing that. And I think that's where you're getting at, Ali, and I agree with you on it. State of the Steelers says, any truth to Avery getting cut because he wanted to be ahead of Highsmith? I heard this. Someone wrote to me yesterday on the show and said the exact same thing. Okay, if there is a legitimate source, even if there's not if this is a Reddit thread, can you guys send that to me? Because I would like to read this. I have not heard anything about that. It is hilarious because here we are back-to-back seasons. Really, if this is true, it starts to make me wonder about Alex Highsmith. Why is it that every edge rusher who comes to town who has even any sort of talent whatsoever just immediately assumes like, yeah, I'm better than Alex. Oh, Alex Highsmith? Oh, I'm better than that kid. I mean, I got it from Miles Ingram last year. I completely understood Miles Ingram last year. I wish, and I hope, I shouldn't say I wish, I hope that Tomlin was very upfront with Ingram when they had the conversation before they signed him, of telling him, like, look, Alex is our guy. We want you to be the third edge rusher. We want you to kind of get worked in, but you're not going to start. You would hope that was the conversation because that was probably the truth. Now, if Ingram heard that and said, okay, I know you're saying that today, but I'm going to prove to you that I'm better, fine. You can't deal with that. If Avery came in and had the exact same conversation and thought the exact same thing, it almost makes me wonder more. Like, forget about the Avery thing. Almost makes me wonder more about Highsmith. But I don't know whether that's true. Again, I watched that tape against Jacksonville, and I saw legitimate reasons to be concerned about a player, not as a pass rusher, but as a run defender and as his ability to keep contained on a mobile quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, which could have been bigger reasons why he got cut. Eric says, I like that you came full circle. Draft night, I thought we might have to bring out the defibrillator. Yeah. Well, listen, this is who I am. This is my personality. Okay. I mean, this is, it's highs, lows, baby. I mean, I don't do, you never see Tony who's like, man, he just seems like a normal, just, he's not happy. He's not sad. He's kind of like, I don't do middle of the road. When it's going good, it's the best. This is the best thing I've ever seen. And when it's bad, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. Okay. And so if they had drafted Malik Willis that night, it would have been the best thing that's ever happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers and me personally. And when they drafted Kenny, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, and of course I'm coming full circle. It's again, look, I think people, I have opinions on how the Steelers do things, right? As we all do, right? There are players that I like, players that I don't like on the team, Now, at the end of the day, what I want more than anything, right? I try to be an analyst here. That's what I try to do here on the show or whatever, and try to provide, unique analysis and whatnot. But make no mistake about it. At the end of the day, I am a Steeler fan through and through. Okay. And the only thing that I want on Sundays, more than being right, I don't care about being right. I care about the Steelers winning football games, baby. That's all I care about. So if Kenny Pickett gives this team the best chance to win, and it makes me look like an absolute fool because that tape will be out there forever of me kind of moping as the Steelers took their future Hall of Fame quarterback in Kenny Pickett, I don't care. I'm the same guy that built up Duck Hodges like he was going to be a Hall of Famer, okay? I mean, who cares? That's who I am. So, yeah, listen, I came all the way around. And again, listen. Now, I don't think if things go wrong for Kenny, I won't take a victory lap. I won't do that because it's going to suck for the Steelers. At this point, like, they took the guy. The other thing I'll say, to defend myself, and I probably should have I probably should have, kind of had a motivational poster on my second monitor or something that had this. I did say throughout the process when it came to draft time, my big motto was, I don't care who the Steelers take as long as they take their guy. Get the guy that you love, not the guy you like. Don't settle for the guy you like. Go get the guy you love. That's why I kept saying throughout the entire process, go trade up. Go trade up for the guy. If you love a guy, go trade up to get him. Because you don't just sit around and go, well, look, there were 3 quarterbacks in this draft that I really liked, and we ended up with a third of those guys, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you end up with a bad quarterback. You take a guy, you're like, yeah, this guy's fine. I like him. I would have really liked the other 2, but I'll settle for this guy. That was my big fear going into draft night, was that there was going to be a run on quarterbacks, and we're going to get, at the end of the day, it'd have been like, all right, Sam Howell and Matt Corral are left. Who are the Steelers going to take? It's like, oh, they took Matt Corral. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, great. The fourth quarter, sick. Awesome. Yeah. That was what I was worried about. So, yeah, I was super sad. But at the end of the day, the Steelers did do what I wanted them to do, which is they went and got their guy. And at the end of the day, should you trust this guy or Mike Tomlin when it comes to quarterback evaluation? Probably Mike Tomlin. I would say probably Mike Tomlin. Yeah. Mighty Zero here says Tomlin didn't give Kenny the start this game. I don't think he will week 1. I don't think he will week 1 either. I'm still a believer that he's going to go with Mitch because this is everything we've heard about this. Every Steeler insider, everyone has always, it's only this week that we start to hear guys like Kaboli say, Kenny's making a late run for this. You go back to Jay Glazer from a year ago. Jay Glazer said Tomlin didn't want to start over with a rookie. He wanted a veteran. Jay Glazer was on site at Latrobe this year, and what did he say? He went on that, whatever it was, TikTok or Instagram, whatever it was, and he said, this is not a quarterback battle. Mitch Trubisky is QB1. Again, Jay Glazer is very good friends with Mike Tomlin. So when Jay says something, you can really trust that. And the same with, Kaboli's got good insiders. Again, these Steelers beat reporters, I know they get a lot of flack. Like a lot of them are, they do a good job of covering the football team and kind of being knowledgeable about, how this team operates. And so while we on the outside, we get all hyped up about Kenny. Kenny, if I'll go back to this thing. I've said this before on the show, so I apologize if I repeat myself, but let's not let it get lost that if Kenny Pickett wins this job, he won it in spite of Mike Tomlin. He won this job in a job that he was not given a chance to win, right? Tomlin kept saying quarterback battle. But he gave only Mitch Trubisky QB1 reps. And so again, Mitch kind of had to do this thing with one arm tied behind his back. He had to do this thing with the third team and then the second team, right? And he's just, I'm only going to get, he only got 2 drives against Jacksonville. You understand how perfect he had to be throughout this entire process? And again, I would say this about the Lions, he kind of has to be a little bit perfect in that one too, if he's actually going to win it. But what does that say about Kenny Pickett, the gamer in him? We talk about, the it factor that guys have. This guy went out there and won a job that basically the coaching staff basically didn't really give him a chance to win. They didn't really make this a battle. They put him in a battle against Mason, and he ended up beating out Mitch. How awesome would that be? Again, it's Kenny Hype Train, baby. Kenny Hype Train, baby. All right. We're over an hour, of course. I do these things. I'm like, all right, it'll take, what was it going to be, like 20, 30 minutes to show? How long could it possibly be? And then, of course, we get to going on chat, and we're at an hour. But I love it. That's why I love doing this show. That's why I love doing this thing live. Happy I started doing it live. All right. State of the Steelers says, is there a potential comp pick capital by keeping Mason? Well, maybe. But he wouldn't. So the comp picks work by a certain number of players that have to qualify by the amount of money that they get signed on their next deal. So if you think that Mason Rudolph can make a significant amount of money with his next deal, and I guess has a backup quarterback ever gotten signed and then got a comp pick? I probably shouldn't look this up live, but maybe I will. Let's look up last year. I think because overthecap.com does a good job of this, where they list out comp picks. And of course, now I'm going to go on their site and not be able to find comp picks. So this is going to make for a great podcast. Comp picks. Here we go. So did any backup quarterback earn a comp pick and again, it gets offset by the guys you sign. No, this is okay. Actually, this exercise doesn't need to be done. And I'll tell you why. Steelers are going to have enough cap space next year they're going to have enough needs on this team, linebacker and offensive line and probably corner, that they're going to need to go out and sign some free agents that even, let's say Mason goes out there and gets, $9 million a year or something crazy. They would still probably offset that by whatever corner or O lineman or whatever they signed that would just kind of offset the deal they get from another team. All right. State of the Steelers says Tomlin out there. If there's a quarterback battle, put it out there. There's a quarterback battle. If Kenny outperforms Mitch, but Mitch doesn't do enough to lose it, how does Tomlin justify what everyone else can see if he starts Mitch? Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on your show, right? Which is there's the fan base component of this. There is the kind of the outside. Okay, Tomlin may have his own vision of how he wants this to play out, but I talked about this on State of the Steelers, and I'll kind of give a TLDR here. You can listen to the full point on the show. The problem for Tomlin is if Kenny doesn't come out there on Sunday and look like the kind of player who everyone goes, okay, maybe we pump the brakes a little bit on Kenny, right? If there isn't a pump the brakes moment for Kenny and he looks good again, maybe not great, but not good enough to actually overtake Mitch. The season starts out in such a way that is very bad. It's just not an advantageous matchup for the Steelers, both from a defensive performance against the Bengals, who are probably going to put up a lot of points on this team, and an offense that, just the Steelers have not done well offensively against this Bengals team. They match up so well on the defensive line, and they're not going to be able to run the ball, right? You got corners that can kind of, with the Uzier, who's going to be able to probably travel with Deontay, and then you got, I like Mike Hilton versus Chase Claypool in the slot. I mean, I think that's actually going to be a pretty good matchup. But regardless, right? You see what I'm saying? They're going to have to go to Cincinnati. The Steelers got waxed by Cincinnati twice last year. Mitch could very easily struggle in that football game. And then you're going to come home to Acrisure, where Kenny Pickett is he's a legend already. And if that offense does get off to a quick start against New England, Bill Belichick defense, where the Steelers, again, we know that history. Yeah, I mean, it is going to be tough, I think, for Tomlin, who he's not the kind of coach who I think plays, who lets the fans and all the kind of the outside pressure play a role in this thing. But at the end of the day, boy, it's going to kind of roll downhill for him, right? Where it's like the fan pressure is going to build and build and build. It's not exactly the kind of opening schedule. You could easily see this team be 0-2, right? I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom guy for the season, but loss to Cincinnati early. Belichick defense shuts down this team week 2. You go into a Thursday game against Cleveland, and if that's another loss, I don't care how they lose it. Kenny Pickett against the Jets, right? So I get your point here, which is that, look, at the end of the day, if it's almost Kenny's job, I like this take, actually. I should have said this on your show. It's almost Kenny's job to lose, because at the end of the day, even if they start Mitch is probably going to struggle to start the year, and that's going to lead to a situation where you're going to end up starting Kenny earlier than you probably wanted to, right? By week 4, you're probably going to end up in a situation where, all right, it's Kenny time, and Kenny Pickett wins this job anyway, even though, and this is, of course, assuming that on Sunday Kenny does enough good things that the fan base is still rallying behind him, even if he doesn't do enough to prove to Mike Tomlin that he should be the day 1 starter. It's like, okay, he's not the day 1 starter, he's the week 4 starter in that case. Assuming that the beginning of the season is a little slower to get started than maybe some of us Steeler fans may like. All right, so now we're over an hour, and I think that's going to do it for me today. Thank you all for watching or listening if you're listening to this on audio version. Again, if you are listening to this on audio version and you want to watch me live on YouTube, you can head on over to YouTube, search Steeler Country with Tony Serino. We're going to be live. I don't know. I know I kind of promised that I'll be live for that Lions game. I'm going to try and make that happen. It is my dad's birthday, though, so, I'm not going to kick him out. He's coming over for breakfast. I'm not going to kick him out if he wants to stay over for the Steeler game. So I may not be able to do this thing live. We'll see. But regardless, I'll be back early next week to recap the Lions game. We'll talk about the 53-man cutdown. We'll talk about whoever ends up being QB1. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now and you'd like to get this as an audio podcast, search Steeler Country wherever you find podcasts. You'll find me there. Subscribe to the channel. And on your way out, if you're watching live, like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Helps me out. And I'll be back next week to recap Steelers, Lions, all the roster cuts, and who is QB1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right here on Steeler Country.